Have you ever wondered what happens when someone with all the power, all the money, and all the respect in the world suddenly steps into a place where no one knows who they really are? Imagine this, a billionaire CEO, the face behind a chain of luxurious restaurants, slipping into one of his own establishments dressed like a regular customer, unnoticed and unrecognized, just to see the truth of what goes on behind the polished doors. That's exactly what happened this night, and what he discovered changed not only his life but the life of a young waitress who thought the world had already turned its back on her. And before I tell you what unfolded, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe right now, because this story is one that will stay in your heart long after it ends. It was late evening, the kind of time when the hum of the city melted into the rhythm of clinking glasses and muted conversations inside restaurants. Daniel Hughes, 42 years old, sharp-featured with a presence that commanded attention in business circles, had left behind his tailored suits and polished shoes to wear a plain navy hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers. To anyone watching, he looked like a man finishing his workday, not the visionary CEO who had built Haven's Table into one of the country's most beloved dining chains. He wasn't there to be recognized, he was there to feel the pulse of his creation from the ground up. He stepped inside the warm glow of the restaurant, inhaling the scent of rosemary bread and sizzling steak, hearing the soft jazz floating above conversations. To his left, a young couple laughed over shared pasta. To his right, an elderly man sat alone reading a newspaper with a glass of red wine. Everything seemed perfectly in place, exactly as his managers always reported. But then his eyes shifted toward the far corner of the dining room, where a young waitress leaned against the wall, her notepad clutched in trembling hands, her eyes shimmering with tears she was trying to hide. Something about the way she wiped her face quickly, forcing a smile whenever a customer glanced at her, hit him like a weight. She couldn't have been more than 24, with tired eyes that told stories beyond her years. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose bun, a few strands falling forward, and though her uniform was neatly pressed, her shoulders sagged as if carrying burdens no one else could see. Daniel chose a table near hers, his instincts pulling him closer. He wanted to understand, to see firsthand what was happening, and not through the polished reports of his managers. She walked over to his table with a practiced smile, her voice slightly hoarse as she asked if he'd like to see the menu. But her hand shook when she placed the glass of water in front of him, and he noticed her wiping her eyes again when she turned away. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, his voice carrying the genuine warmth of a man who wasn't pretending to be kind. She froze, her back half-turned, clearly startled that someone had noticed. For a moment she didn't answer, but then she forced another smile. "I'm fine, sir. Just tired. Long day, you know." He nodded, though he didn't believe her. He knew what tired looked like, this was something deeper, rawer. As he ordered a simple dish, grilled salmon with vegetables, he watched her move from table to table, always trying, always polite, but faltering at the edges. When she returned with his order, her eyes were redder than before, and this time he could hear the slight crack in her voice as she asked if everything was all right. He leaned forward and said quietly, "Sometimes it's okay to not be okay." That single line seemed to break something inside her. She set the plate down carefully, then covered her mouth as a tear slipped down her cheek. She whispered an apology and rushed toward the back hallway, disappearing from the dining room. Daniel sat there, heart heavy. This wasn't the kind of problem numbers in a ledger or glowing 5-star reviews could reveal. This was human. This was the heartbeat of his business, the people who gave their sweat, their hours, and often their unseen struggles to keep it alive. After a few minutes, he stood up and walked toward the hallway where she had gone, ignoring the curious glances of other customers. He found her near the employee lockers, crouched against the wall, her arms wrapped around her knees as she tried to quiet her sobs. For a moment he just stood there, not as a CEO, not as a businessman, but as a man watching another human being unravel. Then he stepped closer, kneeling slightly so his voice wouldn't feel overpowering. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said softly. "But I couldn't walk away either. You look like you're carrying something alone. Sometimes it helps to share, even with a stranger. She wiped her face and shook her head, embarrassed. You don't want to hear my problems. Customers don't come here for that. Maybe not, he replied, but people aren't just customers and waitresses. They're people. And people need someone to listen. She hesitated, then finally whispered, I'm sorry. It's just, everything feels like it's falling apart. My mom's in the hospital, bills keep piling up, and every shift I'm here, I feel like I'm failing both at work and at home. Tonight I just got a call that they might need another surgery, and I don't know how I'll ever pay for it. I tried to keep it together out there, but, her voice broke, and fresh tears ran down her cheeks. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. This wasn't just an employee. It was someone whose entire life was unraveling while she still put on a uniform and served others with a smile. He wanted to tell her right then who he was, that she wasn't just speaking to a stranger but to the man who could change everything for her with a single decision. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the rawness of her pain, maybe it was the thought that revealing himself now would make his kindness feel transactional instead of real. So he simply said, You're not failing. You're fighting. And sometimes the strongest thing we can do is admit we're tired. But you're not alone, even if it feels like it. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face, perhaps wondering why this man cared at all. And for the first time that night, she let out a shaky laugh. You sound like someone who's been through this before. He smiled faintly. Maybe I have. Or maybe I just know what it's like to feel unseen. At that moment, she didn't see a CEO or a customer, just a man who cared. And for Daniel, that was enough. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. What he had discovered tonight was more than just a waitress in tears. It was a reminder of why he had built his restaurants in the first place, not just to serve food, but to serve people. He would come back, he decided. Not just tomorrow, but again and again, until he understood every layer of what was happening here. Because behind the tears of one waitress, he suspected there were stories of many more. Stories worth hearing, and lives worth changing. And if you've stayed with me through this first part of the story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because what happens next will shock you, and inspire you even more. The next evening, Daniel returned, once again blending in with the crowd. But this time, he called the young waitress aside after her shift. With calm eyes and a reassuring smile, he finally revealed the truth. He wasn't just a customer, he was Daniel Hughes, the CEO of the very restaurant she worked in. She froze, her mouth opening in shock, unsure if she should apologize or cry again. But instead of scolding her, he handed her a card and said, Your dedication inspires me. From now on, your mother's medical bills are taken care of. You focus on her, and yourself. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from pain, they were from relief and gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt hope. And for Daniel, it was a reminder that true success is measured not by profits, but by people. Don't forget, like this video and subscribe for more inspiring stories.